who are attending in situ, and our big online community who will be following February webinars remotely. It's great to have you all here in Geneva or in situ for our February webinar. I hope that you had a really eventful and interesting month. It was very busy on our side. We've been traveling quite a lot, attending quite a few events. And fortunately, the February has only 28 days, therefore we'll have to stop this rush. And that will, as we'll see, we'll summarize what are the main developments in February and what we can expect ahead of us in March. Today we have here with us our guest who came to deliver the lecture at GCSP, Vladimir Radunovic, from our office in Belgrade. As you know, Vladimir is following issues on net neutrality and cyber security, and he will be commenting on the main developments on during the month of February. We will be, you know, what is the purpose of our monthly briefing is to summarize the main developments out of the big flow of events and dynamism in internet governance and digital politics. This is the main purpose, and also to indicate what are the events and developments that we can expect during the next month, during the month of March. Therefore, this is the main setup and organization of our discussion today. We will start with the summary of the main events in February. Could we have the slide? Okay, as you may recall, we started now for those for remote participants, you can go for our timeline. Now we are displaying on the screen timeline, internet governance timeline, when you can see what are the main developments in February. And okay. I will be a bit. Oh, okay, see it. Good. As you can see on this slide, there were quite a few on the timeline. You have the four major lines. You have GenevaInternetPlatform events, our events. Then you have a second line, IANA transition and ICANN events. Third segment deals with VERSIS, and the fourth segment with other events and developments. And the first major, there were few events at the beginning of the month, but the first major policy event was ICANN 52nd meeting in Singapore. And you will be seeing, you'll be hearing later on from Vlad and from our colleagues from ICANN what was discussed during this event. At the beginning of the month, Federal Communication Commission (FCC) announced their proposal for net neutrality, and it will be also one point that we'll discuss during our events today. There was the White House summit on cybersecurity and consumer protection in Silicon Valley, quite an important event combining question of cybersecurity and use of the internet. Towards the end of the month, yesterday, and this is the reason why we moved the monthly briefing from our usual Tuesday lunchtime to Friday lunchtime, was the announcement by Federal Communication Commission on the new rulings on net neutrality. Basically, net neutrality was announced as a public utility, and we will be discussing in more details what is the main impact of this ruling of Federal Communication Commission, both for the use of the internet in the United States and globally. This is more or less mapping of a few key events. Therefore, FCC proposal at the beginning of the month, a conclusion of a discussion yesterday with the voting of the Federal Communication Commission, endorsing the net neutrality issues. Second, ICANN meeting in September, 52nd the ICANN meeting in September, discussing usual set of the ICANN issues, IANA transition domain names. And the third major development was White House cyber security summit in Silicon Valley. As you can see, February hasn't been that as eventful as January. January had much more events, much more dynamic development. One can argue that it was a lull before the major developments in March. We'll go back to slides. Next, please. Next. Now, as you may recall, during the January briefing, we introduced barometer, the idea of IG barometer, Internet Governance Barometer, as a way to see what is the pressure on specific issues in the field of Internet governance and digital politics. And here is our estimate, and I would like also to hear your views on the pressure during the month of February on the question of cybersecurity. The pressure was high. Global IG architecture, it wasn't that high. There were not that many events discussing the global arrangement, the internet governance. IANA transition, ICANN, and new domains was high. Also, online privacy and data protection was relatively quiet comparing to previous months. Net neutrality, because of FCC ruling, was high. And jurisdiction issues were not as important as they were. Next, please. Cybersecurity was kept high on digital agenda, mainly due to the President Obama's speech on the White House event in Silicon Valley, where he basically went to internet industry and asked internet industry to be more cooperative in cybersecurity measures of the US government. And it was an interesting event, which also wasn't attended, and we can discuss it later on, by the, for example, leaders of internet industry, which people interpreted in different ways as a signal to the question of cybersecurity. Vlad, I know that you have some points from the technical perspective why cybersecurity was very high, still with the high pressure during the month of February. Could you just reflect on it?
Yes, thank you. So this was definitely the main event. Even though it's the US-based event, we can say this is something happening in the US, but there are two components of that are global. One is that Silicon Valley is providing most of the services that we use every day, all of us around the world. So our data are stored somewhere in the clouds, hosted by Silicon Valley companies. So anything that happens in the US when it comes to Silicon Valley and the relations between the industry and the US government has a lot of impact on our data and on security. That's one thing. The other thing is that there is a lot of talks that the only way you can secure cyberspace is the cooperation, is exchange of information. The question is, what kind of information? I think in these discussions, some of the corporate leaders said, yes, we should share information with the government, but that means kind of a metadata, what attacks we faced, or what problems we face, but not the data about our customers, because the data about customers is something that can endanger our reputation as a corporate sector. So that's where the trust is lost, and cooperation and this multi-stakeholder approach to security can work only if there is a trust between the corporate sector, users, and government. And that's something that's been diminished for years, or in the recent years, especially in the US case. Snowden is one affair, but there is more. And why cybersecurity is high on the agenda, or was in February, was also because there were two other developments. One was the Kaspersky report. Kaspersky, the most famous leading antivirus and cybersecurity company, report discovering a software, secret software, so to speak, within the hard drives produced by a huge number of major producers of hard drives. Western Digital, Seagate, and many others, which was incorporated in a very core level of the software that drives the hard drives to work. That means you can't detect it. That means your antivirus software doesn't help. That means no one but the researchers that have time to do that, like Kaspersky, can effectively know about it. And that's really a backdoor to all of our data. And Kaspersky linked it quite directly with the NSA and with the US. Now, Kaspersky is the Russian company, Moscow-based company, so there is a bit of reservation to that. But there were some voices from the former NSA affiliates that confirmed that this is quite possible. So this is another affair which is diminishing the trust in the US companies and corporate sector as well, and in the US government. The second one was a similar thing, finding the small piece of software in Lenovo computers, which is a Chinese now, but this software is more towards introducing the adware, all these advertisements in our browsers and so on, that we can probably cut off with some software and browser settings. But if it's incorporated in a very software, the computer, you can't really cut it that easily. Now that was diminishing the trust in the industry, because the industry wanted to simply skip certain levels of our own settings and privacy protection, and it also opens the door for security breaches. So those were high punches in the trust, which is key. And there was another important event, which was the Munich Security Conference, a famous one, a global one. Cybersecurity was not that high on the agenda. It was incorporated within the other discussions, but it was specifically incorporated within discussions about warfare, showcasing even with a report from the Munich conference that cyber activities are an important part of a modern or future hybrid war. Economic aspects, warfare and so on, and cyber aspects clearly as a strong.
Next topic which we have been following since January is the development of global IG architecture. When we say global IG architecture, it's not necessarily about buildings, about the traditional architecture. It's a framework through which the internet should be governed. Institutions, mechanisms, forms and rules. And during the month of February, there was only one major event, which was adoption of the resolution of IGF renewal by European Parliament. But as you will see, we can expect that in March, discussion on the IG architecture will be in the focus, especially also throughout the year towards the Versus Plus 10 summit in New York. And we will reflect later on it. Next. IANA transition. I think that we have a Nigel who will brief us about both IANA transition and the main developments in Singapore. Vlada, would you like to comment on it briefly?
Yes. So very briefly, the whole story about IANA transition and the IANA function, which is just as a short reminder, the IANA function is the set of functions which relate to the way the domain names are being distributed or organized, implemented in a way. IP numbers, the numbers of computers on the net, have been distributed around the world, and some other parameters, technical parameters of the networks are being distributed. Currently, this operational part is done by IANA, IANA function, which is delivered by ICANN, but under the contract of the NTIA, the US. So the process says that by the end of September, this relation between the NTIA, the US government, and IANA should cease, and that there should be a new mechanism how these operational aspects are going to be delivered, or rather controlled or overviewed, right? And the whole process within the ICANN, who has been asked, as someone who is doing currently the IANA function, to conduct, is becoming very complex. Timeline is very short. ICANN has to go for inclusiveness, for multi-stakeholder model. Multi-stakeholder model, as we discussed, produces a catch-22, and I'm sure you'll blog on that. The more you include, the greater the complexity of the system, the more formalization, and it goes back, and less inclusiveness. But I think we should hear from Nigel. Nigel is from ICANN. If Nigel is around, to maybe comment what happened at the Singapore meeting, where basically it should be a kind of a milestone upon which we might see if it's reasonable to expect that by the end of the year, by the end of September, we will have the new model, or it might be prolonged. If we have Nigel, do you have one?
Yeah. Yes. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes. Excellent. Well, I'll be very brief, and thank you very much for the opportunity just to say a few words. Yeah, that's a lovely picture, isn't it? Yes, thank you. So I won't go on video, so I'll spare you that. I'll spare you that pleasure. But I am sitting in Geneva. So the ICANN meeting was held in Singapore, and some of you online and no doubt in Geneva were there. It was one of our 3 meetings that we have every year, and as was noted, this meeting was dominated to a large extent by discussions on the IANA transition. And the IANA transition, as you've just heard, reflects the announcement in March 2014, so nearly a year ago now, by the US on their intent to transition their stewardship of the IANA function to the global internet community. And ICANN were asked to set a process in train to try and find a solution with the community. And so a lot of work has taken place in the meantime, and the Singapore meeting, I think Jovan was right, was really a sort of key meeting where all the work came together. And essentially, there's 2 tracks of this work. First of all, there's the IANA transition work itself, which is looking at the 3 functions, which are the protocol parameters that the IETF deal with, the IP numbers that the regional internet registries deal with, and the names, which ICANN deal with. And these 3 issues are covered by the so-called contract, the IANA contract that ICANN has with the NTIA. So in terms of transitioning that responsibility, there's both the IP number community, so that's the community of the people responsible for IP numbers, and the protocol parameter community have already reported on their solution, which essentially is to allow ICANN to continue the role it plays in terms of reporting changes in this community to the root of the internet, with some safeguards applied. The naming part, so this is where a new GTLD is introduced or a new country code is introduced or changed, is of course more complex and more politically sensitive. And the naming community, when they came to Singapore, essentially came with 2 different proposals. What's called an internal proposal, in that ICANN itself would take on this responsibility, again with some additional accountability measures, or an external proposal, as was called, where you would have some external body that was monitoring what ICANN was doing in this respect. In parallel to these discussions is the so-called accountability track. So this is the cross-community working group on accountability. And what this group is doing is really in parallel to the IANA transition, in that it's essentially saying, right, well, okay, if the US is going to go away and ICANN is going to pick up this responsibility, then we want to have ICANN more accountable. And what measures, ICANN is pretty accountable already, but what enhanced measures are needed to allow this to go forward. And there's a discussion on all sorts of enhanced measures, including sort of recalling the board if the board doesn't behave in certain ways, etc. So in Singapore, this was the main theme, and discussions were ongoing. And although the time frame is one where we hope that the proposals can be put to the NTIA by the summer, clearly there's pressure on the timescale, but we're all working towards the timescale whereby by Buenos Aires, which is the next meeting in towards the end of June, most of this work will have been taken forward. So those are the dominant themes. Of course, the ICANN meeting also discusses a number of other issues, including a potential new round on generic top-level domains, further work on the WHOIS, which is all to do with the names and the directories, and of course, internet governance in general. And we had discussions in Singapore on such issues as the IGF mandate, on the WSIS, and on the forthcoming UNESCO conference. I'll stop there. Thank you for the opportunity.
With us remotely in Geneva, and I can see that we have quite a few participants from Geneva accessing it remotely. It's a new trend. Although I can tell you we have a really nice group of people here with possibility to discuss and exchange IG issues. Nigel, we will get back to the question of the domain names later on if you stay with us. And you provided a great summary of the icon transition, and I can tell you, with your permission, I will use your recording to explain to friends of mine what it is all about. A few days ago, I was asked by one diplomat who is moving into internet governance policy to explain him what it is all about, and I can tell you, in spite of your great graphs that I can put, it is extremely difficult, starting from acronyms, parallel processes. And this is in discussion that Vlad and I had. We call it a sort of inclusiveness paradox. In order to include more people, you need to formalize some processes, as ICANN did. You started with really open and inclusive process, and that inclusiveness and the mechanisms that are created around it create a complexity, and ultimately complexity can reduce participation. And it is really catch-22 almost, that we have to discuss not only in the internet governance, but in other policy fields where inclusiveness is needed. And we'll get back to the additional comments on the Singapore meeting. Next, please. Well, that's the next question that Nigel, you may provide us with a quick update. It's related to new domains. You mentioned that there was discussion on new domains, and what we notice is the shift towards the stronger public interest comments, inputs, requests when it comes to new domains, whether they are geographical domain names or domains which some communities consider to be of a public relevance. We know the controversy about the domain .wine and the objection by quite a few European governments for the registration of this domain. And what we saw in Singapore was a discussion on safeguarding public interest strings, especially initiated by government representatives in the Government Advisory Council. Nigel, could you give us a quick update on that aspect of new domains aspect in discussion? What happened in Singapore on these issues, on these aspects, please?
Yes, thank you, Jovan. I mean, I'll be fairly brief, and I'm no way the expert on this, but I did observe some of the discussions. I mean, I think it's fair to say that the current round on generic top-level domains for many people is sort of is over. Although it's technically it's far from over, in that although I think over 500 new domains have gone into the root of the internet, there's still quite a few domains to be sorted out. And as Jovan mentioned, there are still some potential controversial names such as .wine, which are going through the process. So the current round is far from being completely finished. But of course, talk goes towards a new round, and how that new round should be structured. And the ICANN board is very open on this. There's a number of surveys that have been initiated, and there will be extensive consultation of all in the community on what sort of names should we be encouraging in any new round. And as you rightly say, the governments are discussing this already in the Government Advisory Committee. They've been doing some work on geographical names, as you recall. It was some geographical names such as .Amazon, which caused quite a lot of controversy during this first round, and also public interest, as you say, what names are in the public interest and what aren't, and where you have a generic name like bank or which has been applied for in the first round, what sort of public interest commitments can you put on the registry for that name, so that that name is used in a responsible way. So there are discussions on that as well. Also, the whole issue of community names will come up and has been discussed, and no doubt will be discussed more. In the first round, many people applied for community names. So and these were often the community applications were also commercial applications, in that a name like .music, for instance, was applied for by commercial operators or commercial registries, but also for community purposes. And many people think that the community names should perhaps be given a greater prominence in any future round. So I'll stop there. I mean, there's a long way to go. I mean, nothing is going to be decided for at least, I would have thought, 2 or 3 years on this issue. Thank you.
Thanks. Could you stay with us for comments? We'll have a Q&A later on after the initial presentation. And it will be important that we hear also your views on the questions that will be and comments will be asked. Could you have next slide? Well, the next question, which according to our IG barometer didn't have high pressure during the month of February, was the question on online privacy and data protection. And here the major developments was Google's reaction to the US only right to be forgotten, their advisory council. That was a relatively quiet month for the question of data protection, online privacy, except the preparation for what we can expect a very busy month of March, especially with the meeting of the UN Human Rights Council, which may introduce some new developments in the field of the right to privacy. Next. Net neutrality, well, yesterday, this is a photo from the session, session of the FCC, Federal Communication Council, where the 3 votes were for the President Obama's proposal to reclassify Internet as a broadband Internet access service as a telecommunication service under Title II. It could sound a bit bureaucratic and general, but this development is one of the major developments in the digital policy and internet governance, as Vlada indicated, mainly in the United States, but given the importance of the internet industry in the United States, with impact to the rest of the world. Vlada, since you have been working a lot on net neutrality, you can give us 3 or 4 tweets of the relevance of this ruling for the internet, and what is the gist of the ruling, please?
Thanks, Johan. U.S. has been known for this different approach between telecommunications and broadband. Telecommunications has been heavily regulated for years. Broadband has been left since early 2000s and even before as unregulated. So information service, right? Because of the problems with net neutrality, i.e. the behavior of the major telecoms over there, which started influencing the traffic flow, slowing down some services, asking Google and the others to pay for priority and so on. FCC, the Communication Commission, was trying to find a way to control this in a way, but they couldn't because they didn't have the authority, because beforehand broadband and information services were differently classified. Now this is the final step, or probably not the final step. This is another step in this fight between the Communication Commission authorities and the corporate sector, finding another way to put more authority of the communication authority over what broadband providers do. The results, on one hand, means that the FCC will now have the opportunity to have an impact on how corporate sector telecoms deal with the traffic and openly protect net neutrality without any problems. On the other hand, that means that other obligations related to liability, related to costs, rates, and so on, that the FCC can do and was able to do over telecommunications can now also be implemented over telecoms when it comes to broadband and internet. And that's the major argument of the broadband providers: don't overregulate us. Now, the FCC clearly said we are not going to implement other rules like control of the rates and so on, just having the right to control net neutrality. But we'll see. On a global level, I suspect business will come back to a court or something. On a global level, I think this gives another guidance to other countries with regards to trust in the corporate sector, with regards to governance levels and regulatory levels, with regards to liability of internet service providers. So it will probably set the path for other governments, including Europe, to maybe move more towards protection of net neutrality and public interests when it comes to product.
Just to get back to the context, the key issue is if the internet service, internet communication, which we use these days, has equal status, or there are different internets, VIP internet, faster, slower internet. Now, net neutrality, which argues that internet should have the same treatment, except some technical management features, but generally speaking, whether it is your access to YouTube, your email, your access, it should have the same treatment when it comes to the communication on transfer through cables. What Vlada said, telecommunication companies in the United States use the vacuum in regulation, vagueness of regulation, which, by the way, facilitated fast growth of the internet. Internet wasn't regulated initially. They used to say, okay, it's not regulated, let us move and let us create different internets. VIP internet, slower, faster internet. Federal Communication Commission tried to deal with this issue without regulation, but it didn't work because they didn't have a mandate. This is the context. Then with this ruling, they say, okay, we are now getting the mandate. Internet broadband is a public utility, and we have the right to force internet service providers to ensure that all internet traffic is equally treated. It is one of the most complex policy issues. I have a training in political science and international relations, but this issue is so complex because you have a Hollywood on one side against net neutrality, Silicon Valley for net neutrality, different parts of the US government. Therefore, it is really amazing for the researchers who are online to do the study of one of the messiest policy issues which you can face. In this context, the ruling of FCC is historical, what happened yesterday, for the United States and for the rest of the world. Other countries like other countries or regions like European Union, but also with some possible impact on the global discussion on the internet and the treatment of the internet as a global public resource.
Maybe a short comment which I just read from Nadira, which is quite correct. This decision was brought 3-2 within the FCC because 3 members of the board were from Democrats, 2 from the Republican Party. Nadira said what will happen when the Congress changes after the elections and so on. President. So this is probably not a long-lasting. Well, we'll see. One thing was that the Congress might act on that, but the recent news was that even the Republicans would not go for that because they don't have the weight in the Congress for the time being. So this is definitely not a permanent thing, but it sets the ground for the next step, especially for Europe, I think, because Europe is going back and forth as a pendulum, and it's not still clear, the new European Commission, what it is going to do. So I think this will set quite a path also for Europe.
Next. Okay, we are coming to the main events in March 2015. We'll go through the timeline. Could be the switch. It's loading. As you can see, in March, here we are today at Internet Governance briefing at the end of the month. There will be a few mainly technical events focusing on technical issues. The main event, next event is UN Human Rights Council, which will be held in Geneva between 2nd March and 27th, or most of the month of March. And one of the important aspects and one of the important issues will be the right to privacy, triggered to the large extent by online privacy, so-called German-Brazil initiative, which started at the UNGA and then moved through the report at the Human Rights Council. And now there are various speculations, and one is that there will be a UN rapporteur on the right to privacy, who will focus on the question on the online privacy, among other issues. Therefore, it will be quite important event when it comes to online privacy and data protection. Then next will be GSMA Mobile World Congress, the gathering of close to 3,000 scientists, business people, researchers, which deal with the mobile issue. One of them will be Vlada. You will brief us what happened in Barcelona. and it is held every year during the first month of March in Barcelona. It will be major gathering discussing mobile telecommunication. During the same week, starting on the 3rd of March, there will be UNESCO's conference Connecting the Dots, which will discuss zoom-out perspectives on internet governance, including the question of ethics, question of the new governance regimes, and it will produce the concluding document. Therefore, for those of you who are part of diplomatic services, this is important part. It won't be just academic conference. There will be concluding documents on connecting the dots, which, according to some views, may feed into the VERSIS process that will be held the next week in Paris. We'll have on the 3rd, we'll have a visit by College of Europe. It is not in the list, but I would like to invite our colleagues, especially from European countries, to join us and to meet 80 students from the College of Europe, future negotiators and diplomats from European countries. There will be Middle East DNS Forum. We'll have a roundtable on open innovation and digital protection here at Geneva Internet Platform. IETF, International Internet Engineering Task Force, will meet on between 22nd and 25th of March. They usually have a nice venues for their conference. I don't know where this one will be held, but this is the major standardization body in the field of internet policy. Therefore, they are deciding on the major internet standards. And especially after the Snowden revelation, and after they realized that some of them, their cipher protection standards were hijacked, they are now becoming more political body than in the past. Therefore, they have to discuss policy aspects. Then at the end of the month, if you can scroll it further, there will be 2 events: Internet Social Forum preparatory meeting in Tunisia, and the Net Mundial initiative meeting in Costa Rica. These are 2 interesting initiatives. Net Mundial initiative, as you know, it came out of the Brazil Net Mundial Summit. It is supported by CGI, Brazilian Internet Community Body, World Economic Forum, and ICANN, as some sort of follow-up to the Net Mundial initiative. And they will have the first meeting of the inaugural coordination steering committee in Costa Rica to see what should be the mandate of the Net Mundial initiative. A week before in Tunis, there will be a meeting of the Internet Social Forum on the fringes of the World Social Forum. This is, as you know, there is the Davos and there is the Porto Alegre, some sort of counterbalance to, on one side you have a meeting of the economic and business elite in Davos, and you have in Porto Alegre people who are concerned with social aspects, social justice, and the other issues, and it's some sort of counterbalancing events to Davos. Therefore, they decided, the group of the few activists decided to create Internet Social Forum, and they will have a meeting in Tunis. Therefore, 2 events, Net Mundial Initiative and the Internet Social Forum, will be some sort of 2 new dynamism on already busy scene of creating global IG architecture, because they will be discussing both. The initiative will be discussing how to create this global internet governance architecture, especially in the preparation for the VERSIS Plus 10 summit in December in New York. We will host a cybercrime event. I try to call it cybercrime and punishment by trying to paraphrase Dostoevsky's famous book, but then my colleagues told me that it is too heavy to call it punishment. Therefore, we'll have a cybercrime and prevention. It will be hosted on 30th of March in the preparation for the Doha Crime Summit, which is the meeting of the ODC UN Office for Drug and Crime Prevention. They have it meeting every 4 years. They will meet in Doha in mid-April, discussing the question of prevention of crime. And cybercrime will be one of the important issues. Therefore, we want to see, 2 weeks ahead of the Doha summit, what are the major issues. Now, I will reveal some secrets. We'll have basically people from the cybercrime community. We'll have not necessarily cyber criminals, but let's say white hat hackers. White hat hackers are benevolent hackers who hack for the public interest. We'll have some cyber cops, people who are involved in the fight against cybercrime, and people who discuss the way how globally cybercrime can be addressed. Diplomats involved in negotiation on the Budapest Convention and other instruments that exist in the field of cybercrime. Therefore, if you're in Geneva, please spend this day with the Cybersecurity Day. There will be a lot of fun. Besides traditional talking, you will see how DNS works, how the Tor works, some insights into dark web, but not very detailed. Can you, Vlada, bring the update of that?
Well, we can't reveal everything, but yeah, there'll be a chance to have a snapshot of the darknet, dark web, those websites or places, dark places where you can order an assassination or buy drugs. Well, we won't really showcase that; it's not that easy. But some snapshots of that with the help of the hackers, and probably, as you said, the explanation of how these new technologies like the Tor, which provides the anonymity, works. In a simplified technical explanation, then maybe the denial of service simulation and these kinds of things, they can play a little bit. We'll see.
Yes, well, that's now. I just returned from the meeting of our creative lab, and I will reveal one of introduction which we'll discussing during the meeting of creative lab that we had brainstorming. Some of colleagues suggested that we create IG biorhythm or biorhythm, I don't know how you pronounce it, and famous with the physical, emotional, intellectual cycles and this and that. Therefore, maybe for the next briefing we'll have some sort of IG biorhythm built around the policy, technical aspects, and also social aspects.
And depending on the barometer or on the pressure of we are able.
Well, the floor is over to you for our colleagues here in Geneva and our online community, which will be represented by Roxana. For your comments on events in February and events in March, please let us know if we have missed some important development, because there are so many developments going on simultaneously, and suggestions also on the question of barometer and maybe IG biorhythm. Please. Do you have, Vlada, any summing comment while we have famous silence of a few minutes? Please. Could you introduce yourself?
Okay. My name is Madeleine Sherp. I'm a president and founder of Health and Environment Program, a non-governmental organization based in Cameroon and Geneva. And my question is going directly for the event of March, of 2 of March, for the Y6+10. What do you plan to do during this meeting? In my understanding, I think that we have to adopt a plan of action or propose again another plan of action for the diplomatic conference in September. I don't understand very well what we have to do on 2 of March in ITU.
I have to check what was in our timeline. But Y6+10 processes, is shifting more towards New York and discussion in New York in preparation for the Y6+10. And this is one dynamism that has been happening, and Geneva, except of CSTD, Commission on Science and Technology for Development, hasn't been, there are no indications that Geneva will play a prominent role, apart from the events, ITU's events, CSTD events, but the mainstream negotiation about the Y6+10 will be basically happening in New York, and they will prepare the summit at the end of the high-level meeting at the end of the year. I think the indication is the 2nd of December, that it will be scheduled for the 2nd of December 2015. I think it was a mistake here that to have it on the 2nd of March. Thank you for.
2nd of March.
Mm-hmm.
I intervene. 2nd of March. Sorry, in the 2nd of March should be envoy all the comments of the government regarding a report for Vices plus 10. This is the idea, because we already received a notification regarding it's for this reason was on the timeline.
It's a deadline. Yeah. Thank you. But there won't be event of the meeting itself. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Submit the comments. Yeah. Therefore, please, if you haven't submitted the comments, make sure that your capital and the other stakeholders make a move in that direction.
Hello, also from the online community. We have a discussion around net neutrality right now, with Nigel commenting on what is happening in the EU Council. Sorry. So the EU is discussing today net neutrality, and it is thought that the EU could pass legislation on this before summer. And Stephanie is asking, what do you think will be the impact of new net neutrality rules on other countries and regions? For example, the EU. Does reclassification have any significance outside US?
Well, definitely, it's a good point from Nigel, as always, about the dynamism in Brussels on the question of net neutrality. And probably two most important issues in the IG sphere in Brussels are currently data protection and net neutrality. And as Vlad indicated, there was some sort of balancing act between net neutrality requests and we can call it against net neutrality requests, mainly by telecom industry, we're speaking about European telecom industry. And I would say that with this ruling, the balance will be tilted towards pro-net neutrality views in European Parliament, in other bodies. Some countries already introduced, like Netherlands, introduced the law for the protection of net neutrality. Therefore, we can expect now with the crystal ball exercise, obviously, we can expect a shift towards pro-neutrality view in Europe and worldwide.
Maybe short addition to that is on a global level, the way I see it, it impacts the liability of corporate sector. In a multi-stakeholder model that has been discussed or developed in the previous years, there have been a lot of talks about equal footing and so on and so forth. But at the same time, whenever there is a problem with some of the stakeholders, and usually it's either the government or the corporate sector, in this case the corporate sector, the government step in and say, okay, now we have to assure public interest. Now, this might also raise a new trend, possibly, that the regulation of the information services might be needed in order to protect public interest, and that you can't really leave it to trust only, which might impact also the liability of intermediaries in other areas, which means intellectual property rights, privacy, data protection, and so on. Because one liability might take, it's not reasonable to expect that there will be one type of liability which is enforced, and then the other one is not. So it might shift a little bit the liability of intermediaries in some longer run on a global level. But we'll see. I mean, those are the wider impacts that I can see of net neutrality debate.
And just one comment on 13th and 14th of April, we'll host the conference in Malta together with the government of Malta and the other World Economic Forum and other partners on the question of internet as a global public resource. This is becoming a really important issue, how to protect internet as a global public resource while preserving in the same time dynamism of internet, is innovative space where innovation is happening. And Malta has a lot of expertise and experience from the climate change, law of the sea, in discussion on the global public facilities and global public good. Therefore, on 13th and 14th, before the Hague conference, there will be event in Malta discussing the public aspects of the internet. Good.
So we have another question regarding the timeline of the IANA transition, and Nigel is happy to comment on that, so maybe we can give him voice directly.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Yes, I mean, as I said earlier, the date of September 2000 and this year, 2015, is when the current contract between the NTIA and ICANN expires. That contract is extendable. So, and as the NTIA made clear in the Senate hearing this week, the contract could be extended by two-year periods, or it could be extended by 6 months, or whatever. So it's not a deadline as such. It's but people are working. The community are working towards this timeline in terms of getting a proposal into the NTIA. Hopefully, as I said, by the summer. But it is not a deadline. I mean, obviously, I think the community would like to see a proposal submitted and accepted as soon as possible, so we can all have a degree of certainty by the time we meet in New York for the WSIS General Assembly discussions in December. But we'll have to see how it goes. Thank you.
Discussion online. We will invite our guests here in the room to have discussion with some lunch, serving of some sandwiches and drinks, very light drinks, no wine this time. While online community will use the advantage of having the online chat and online discussion. If there are no, which one?
So Brian from the IGF Secretariat also shared the update. Maybe we can share it with the room. I'm not sure how visible it is there. That the IGF Secretariat is issuing a call for workshop proposals for the IGF 2015 meeting, which is in Brazil in November, if I'm not wrong. Interested individuals and entities are kindly asked to submit workshop proposals through the online forum of the IGF website from 9th of March. Until the publication of the online submission form, workshop proponents are invited to consult template and so on and so forth. So the information are on the IGF website. It's the time, I guess in the next month, the IGF is going to be high as well on the agenda with the preparations and so on.
Great. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Vlada. And as you can see, when I'm seeing this, there are so many deadlines. And for those of you who are active in diplomatic missions, permanent missions here, this is the most probably relevant. When is the next time guillotine which is coming, whether it is 2nd of March or 9th of March or whatever else. And we'll try in one of the suggestions from our consultations with the permanent missions in Geneva here is we'll try to make regular updates about the timeline, when are the deadlines, because ultimately it is what really influences the developments. I hope you found our summary briefing useful and summarizing the major developments in February and indicating what we can expect in March, both in terms of events, deadlines, but also coverage on specific issue. Our next monthly briefing, will be on 31st of March, and we'll have a chance to report more on the IG barometer during the March. On the it seems very high pressure, especially in discussion of IG architecture and other issues. Thank you for joining us today here in the room in Geneva, and for our friends who were online. And special thanks to Vlada and Nigel, who intervened on ICANN issues. Thank you. Thank you.